government goal of strong and sustainable economic growth? Let's take a look. First off, I highly suggest you copy down this definition. We can use this in SACs and exams to help you get the highest marks possible when required, when you need to find the goal of strong sustainable economic growth. So this occurs where economic growth is at its highest potential before encountering unacceptable inflationary, external, or environmental pressures. So those are the three things you need to cover: inflation, external, and environmental. The unofficial goal is between 3 to 3.5 real GDP growth. And we'll go into detail what that all means later. So our goal is to have a sustainable level of economic growth. Why do we achieve this? Is because we want to see growth in real incomes, lower unemployment rates, and increase the government's ability to provide essential services like school. If we grow too excessive, it might create excessive inflation, a rise in external pressures, which we'll cover in Unit 3, Area Study 3, or lead to an overuse of our natural resources, which negatively impacts intertemporal efficiency. We covered all this sort of stuff in Year 11, but if you're new to the course, that's alright. We'll go into all these details throughout the year. So somewhere between 3 to 3.5 economic growth is the unofficial goal. Just remember that sustainable rates of growth can vary over time due to productivity levels. The higher the level of the productivity, the greater economic growth can be handled. This is due to the same amount of resources increasing output that doesn't cause inflation or external concerns. Places like China, for example, can sustain growth rates of over 8% per annum. Why? Because their level of productivity is a lot higher than us. Back in the 90s and early noughties, we did have an economic goal of between 3 and 4%. At those times, maybe our productivities were higher, that we were able to go beyond 3.5% before we experienced inflation or external concerns. So the government may alter their goals based on international trade or international rates of growth also. So yeah, this is not an indefinite, like if we're in these numbers, everything's good. For all we know, maybe we can sustain 4%. We just don't know until we achieve it. So how do we measure economic growth? This is done through GDP. GDP is made up of the total value added during each stage of production process and is calculated every quarter by the ABS and quoted via dollar terms or percentage change from one quarter to the next. What does that mean? It sounds very confusing, but along the process, as things get produced, you're literally only adding to the GDP value the value that you've added yourself during that production. To get a clearer idea, I'll show you this video. I'll cover all the concepts and we'll move on. So this is from Canada, but it's the same idea in Australia. Please watch that video on your own time and we'll get straight back to the PowerPoint. Alright, so hopefully that video gave you a good idea of how GDP is calculated. So we're just looking at the value we've added throughout the production process. The reason why we do this is so we don't double count and make our GDP number overly inflated, which doesn't represent the true production of goods and services within an economy. So chain volume GDP, it's exactly the same as real GDP. It is used by the ABS to estimate the real GDP in the economy. It uses the price from previous periods and apply them to the current period volumes. Therefore, it measures the increase in volumes or rising activity. So let's look at the ABS website now and see what it looks like. Alright, so we're on this website. So how to find the GDP? We need to go here in statistics, go to key economic indicators. And the one you're looking for is the national accounts, gross domestic product, GDP, chain volume measures. So this is where we find our real GDP. So here it is. So from December 2018 to December 2019, GDP grew 2.2%. Alright, 2.2%. It's definitely sustainable, 2.2%, but it's not strong because it's not within the target range of 3 to 3.5%. So from September to December, so in the quarter we grew 0.5%, which is I guess an okay number, but from year to year, that's not so great. We got also GDP per capita. So once you've taken into account the population size, we can see that GDP per capita, we've grown at 0.7%, which is abysmal. Well, at least it's positive. It means that our quality of life has improved from December 2018 to December 2019. So yeah, they show you right here the quarterly change percentage wise. What's contributed to that change? So here it's mainly government, general government consumption. So G1, household consumption. So C, um, change in inventories, which you don't really need to know. That's all right. Imports have increased, so that makes a leakage in our economy, and exports have been sitting. It looks like purely on zero. So to get the details behind all these changes, like they give you a brief summary up here. So household savings ratio decreased, so people are not saving as much. In terms of trade fell, we'll look into that later. You just go to analysis, this little link here, and it tells you what's contributed to economic growth. So household final consumption, essential and discretionary consumption spending. So you can see here that spending on essentials has increased, but discretionary spending has seen a decrease until just recently. I'm guessing that's because of the Christmas period. Who knows? But then again, this is deseasonalized, so all these trends are removed from the calculations. New dwelling investments. We've got mining, non-mining industries. You name it. It's all on here. So this is all everything you need to know in order to explain why GDP is currently where it is. All right. Let's move back to the PowerPoint. So interpreting GDP stats. So seasonally adjusted GDP removes seasonal variations from the GDP data. Example, during December, sales are generally larger due to Christmas. The seasonally adjusted data will remove the Christmas shopping effects to get a better interpretation of how GDP is doing. Trends is the removal of fluctuations in the actual data to give an average line of what is going on. Actual is black and white, the actual physical data. If there's no mention of how GDP figures are reported, it's best to assume that it's seasonally adjusted. Alright, so the one we're looking at, the real GDP, chain volume GDP is already seasonally adjusted and following a trend. So different ways there to calculate the percentage. You can see quarterly growth, annualized growth. If we go back to the ABS website, you can see that they show you all the quarterly growths, seasonally adjusted. So how does it work out? So this is the mathematical equation behind it. Don't worry, you don't need to know it. You just need to know the general gist of what's a quarterly growth, what's an annual growth. So if you say annual, you know it's just the current year minus the previous year. When you say annualized, they've literally just taken one quarter and times it by 4. Alright, that's the main thing you need to understand. And quarterly growth is literally the current quarter minus the previous quarter, divided by its previous quarter, times it by 100, and voila, you get your percentages. So why do we pursue economic growth? This is covered on page 157 and 158 of your textbook. So growth in real income means more resources to satisfy their needs and wants. Material living standards and quality of life improves. Quality of life may improve because richer people become more charitable. Gross domestic income measures all income received from production within the country over a period of time. So you might see that people have more money to spend, so they can buy more goods and services to make them happy. Also, with more money, they tend to be more charitable. For example, during the bushfire crisis, Australians all raised their hands and donated a whole heap of funds to go out there to help those people in need. While in this situation now, where we got COVID-19, the recent Good Friday appeal was the lowest value of charitable donations that we've seen in a very long time, and that's due to poor levels of economic growth that's occurring in our economy right now. Other reasons. It reduces unemployment rates. The government realizes that unemployment causes a waste of potential labor resources, which in turn causes psychological damage to society and unhealthy relationships due to crime and social unrest. How will this affect living standards? Well, it'll impact it all negatively. If economic growth exceeds the rate of growth in productivity, businesses may have to hire more workers to ensure they reap all the benefits of higher profits. Living standards should improve as a result. So guys, productivity can only go so far. So your inputs can only do so much until you need to find new inputs to increase your output. Other reasons, it increases the ability of the government to provide essential services. This happens through increased revenues from taxes, direct and indirect. For people who studied Year 11 economics, you probably remember this. Actually, no, we did cover this last area of study. So direct taxes is for, personal income tax, while indirect is like GST. Taxes that you can avoid if you want to, but you still get taxed if you consume certain products. So this increased levels of revenue through growth in economic activities means more funding available to increase road, rail, port, or even telecommunications infrastructure. All government spending is aimed to improve living standards for everyone. Even if they spend money to help the disadvantaged members of society, society as a whole enjoys improved living standards. Which is true. I mean, if they find a way to help the homeless people, they might not result in committing crimes, which put you guys at social unrest, which puts more negative, non-material living pressure standards on you. So yeah, at the moment, what the government's doing, they're giving the job seekers payment to help alleviate the negative economic impact that COVID-19 is currently giving society. And here is an up-to-date detail of the spending that's occurred in our economy last year, or last year's financial budget. So you can see that healthcare, education, and social securities make up the majority of our spending. And they give you an annual one. The government aims to have economic growth rates that exceed productivity growth rates. Governments and businesses continue to spend big dollars on research and development to increase the nation's productive capacity and permit higher levels of sustainable growth. Increased productivity can have a negative effect on employment growth, as businesses may not hire additional workers to increase their output. This is known as jobless growth. As a result, the government needs to increase the rate of sustainable economic growth to ensure unemployment levels don't increase. The government also wants to make sure that real GDP is greater than the population growth to ensure real growth is occurring. So this is where GDP per capita comes into play. We want to make sure that our GDP output is increasing better than our population, because if it isn't, it means that everyone in the economy is worse off as a result of an increased population. There's less goods and services available for everyone. Okay, so this is a diagram from Trading Economics. They get all the information from the Australian Bureau of Statistics. This is the yearly growth of GDP for the last couple of years. So you can see since throughout this time, it wasn't since June 2018 and March 2018 where we've actually hit the target of 3 to 3.5%. Every other quarter has just missed the mark or missed it completely. As you can see, our economy hasn't been growing as strong as it would like, but it's definitely still sustainable. In fact, I believe since March 2019, we've actually been experiencing negative quarters of GDP growth per capita, and only recovered during this December quarter. So people's living standards actually went backwards during this small period of time. In fact, they say we had a GDP per capita recession during this time. Now, if we look at the maximum trend, if you follow the y-axis, you could see that we have -4, -2, 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. This is the GDP growth per annum. So you can see the last time we had negative growths of GDP was somewhere around 1991, the last time we had a recession. Ever since then, we've been growing fairly strong, fairly good. And if we just look at the last 10 years, you can see when the mining boom actually occurred, where the Australian dollar was at parity with the US. This is the time when China was demanding a lot of our iron ore. Then that slowly disappeared, and economic growth has been sputtering around below 3%. Didn't reach 3% until somewhere in 2016. Then went below again. And yeah, it's probably telling you right now that we might have to change our goal. What is strong and sustainable in this period of time? Based on this data in the last 10 years, maybe 2.5% and 3% should be our new goal. But anyway, I digress. So in terms of trade, please watch the video below on that link. Read the Investopedia definition of it, and then move on and complete activity 5B. See you later, guys.